Okay, Ward, whenever you're ready. Well, welcome to our Tuesday night Torah class. I'm glad you're here. We're getting all ready for Sukkot, so everybody's got all kinds of stuff on their plate, but I always feel real good about just doing the Torah stuff on Tuesday nights. So let me open in prayer. Well, Father God, thank you for the day. Thank you for all the activities that are going on. Thank you for this group of people that found time in their lives to come out and study your word. And I just ask that you'd meet with us tonight. I know you bless those who study your word, and I just ask that you'd work in our hearts, help us to learn from one another, and mostly help us to learn from you. Just help each of us go home with something else to think about and ponder on this coming week. In Yeshua's name, amen. Right, let's see. So we're in, as this is for catch-up, everybody. In case you've forgotten, we're in the book of Genesis, right? And last week, we're actually kind of pretty exciting times here. Jacob has finished his 20-year stint working for his uncle Laban, and Jacob, being Jacob, decided to sneak out of town when his uncle was out of town, and so he picked up his two wives and two concubines and all his gazillion kids and marched off. And Laban came home, found out he was gone, and was quite upset about that, and went and chased him, and we went through all the drama associated with that. And finally, they agreed to part on reasonable terms. They built a little monument, and they swore to each to his own God that they wouldn't cross the line that this monument marks to do harm to the other. So they got kind of a mutual peace treaty, and Jacob's heading on south. Yes? I already have a question. I haven't even done anything. We already got questions. Okay.
So I talked to you about this the other day. And he signed a covenant.
Yep.
And it's the first time the word, I'm going off memory here. This first time the word Yareh is used, which is where we get Torah actually from that.
Okay.
That's the first time it's used. Torah has been used earlier. And if you look in my articles, I say it makes the word for jurisdiction. The actual etymology, at least the juris part of jurisdiction, I would say comes from that.
Okay.
And what they did was they created a line in the sand.
Yeah.
A political line in the sand.
Well, even a literal one, yeah.
What's that?
Even a literal one.
Right.
Yeah.
And said, if I go past, either one of us crosses over this jurisdiction, it's trespassing, essentially.
Yep.
And it says in the King James, harm will come upon us. But the actual word is ra or ra'eh or something like.
Which is evil.
Which is evil,
yeah.
Which is a much stronger term. So the funny thing about it is, the very next topic is, guess what? It's Esau.
Yeah.
His chief nemesis.
Yeah.
The one he's been avoiding for 20 years.
Yep.
And when he first hears he's going to confront him, he says, I'm okay, I got God with me. But then he hears, I got 400 men with me, and he freaks out. So what would be the natural thing for Jacob to do? Run away, run away. That's what he does all the time, right?
That's what Jacob does.
But he can't go back because
he promised he wouldn't cross that line.
Yes,
he's stuck.
He just got through doing that.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm kind of imagining that he's going through this river. You know, that's where the path is.
The Jabbok River, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I've never been there, but I imagine it's probably pretty hard to go around not to avoiding the river.
Oh, yeah, kind of.
You always want to go down where the river is anyway. So him and his 11 sons and Dinah, I think, is a metaphor or similar to the sons of Jacob when they go to Egypt. They go across the Red Sea because they're boxed in. If you believe it the way a lot of people believe that he did, where the Red Sea where they crossed, he's got to go through that big. They all go down to this big wash. The pharaohs are chasing them.
Yep.
And they get all boxed in, and then all of a sudden they get out of this spit of land, and there's the Red Sea. They're stuck.
Yep.
And they're freaking out again, just like they're doing here with
like he's doing here.
Right.
Yeah. It's what you're doing. This is really good because it's really great fun to kind of put yourself in Jacob's position.
Right.
And think about it. I mean, all things considered, he's been dreading this for a long time. He's had this conflict in his mind where, man, I'm not very happy here working for my uncle. He's really kind of been a turkey. and I really would like to go back home. But man, I don't want to go home and face Esau, because he told me last time he saw me that next, as soon as Dad dies, you're dead meat. I'm getting rid of you, dude. So he really doesn't want to do that. But we also have this added piece in there where God told him, okay, you need to go back now. So he knows he needs to do this, and he part of him wants to do it, but he's really dreading it. Especially, like you pointed out, he finally got through with the Laban crisis, and he's marching on down there, and he sends one of his men. He says, go down there and find my brother Esau and tell him, I'm coming to visit. And the guy comes back and says, oh, your brother is excited. He's coming to visit you, and he's got 400 men with him. And it says real clearly, Jacob's heart sank, and he was extremely fearful. Yeah. By the way, this is all chapter 32.
Okay, that's where I'm at.
Good.
Do you think when down here at verse 10, and Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and of God of my father's Isaac, O Lord, who saith unto me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will do thee good. I am not worthy of all the mercies. That's plural. It's not mercy, but mercies.
Yep.
And of all the truth which thou hast shown unto thy servant, for with my staff I pass over this Jordan, and now I am become two camps. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he comes and smites me, the mother with the children. And thou said, speaking of God, saying to him, I will surely do thee good. He reiterates, that's the second time he says that. Mm-hmm. And make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Do you think that was an encouragement to Jacob that he was not going to be going against Esau by himself, but he was going to go with God?
Well, it had to be. But it's more than that. There's a lot of lessons you can learn from that prayer. One is to repeat back to God what he told you, right? And that's what he did. He says, you told me that you'd be with me, and you were. And I'm here to tell you, I didn't deserve all the things that you've done for me, all the mercies that you showed me, but you told me that you'd be with me. And he says, like you say, quite frankly, I'm afraid to go meet Esau. He's coming to greet me with 400 men. I'm fearful, but you said you'd be with me. So you know what's going on in his heart. He's doing what any of us would do. He's kind of having doubt, right? Yeah.
So I guess it would be like calling a friend on a cell phone and saying, hey, you said you were going to meet me here when trouble comes. I just want to know, are you seeing this? Are you watching this? Are you ready?
Yeah, right.
Because I think trouble's on its way.
Here it comes. Yeah. Yep, you're right. You're right. Now, you remember what he did. I wanted to play this up a little bit tonight because I think this is such an interesting part of this whole thing. So he decides, okay, he prays, God, help me. And then he does, I think, what you should do, which is put your best effort into it. Don't just sit there and say, okay, take care of it. I'll wait around and see how this turns out. So he divided his group into, not just two, but I'd say actually four, because he took the handmaidens and their kids and put them in front. And then the next down the line, he put Leah and her 6 kids, sons. And then finally, he put Rachel. And he did this. And now what do you suppose if your name was Judah or Levi or Simeon? How would you feel about this? Right? To say nothing of Dan or one of the handmaidens' kids.
Oh, I just said at least they're not in the first group.
At least they weren't in the first group. Yeah, I should go back and find out who was in the first group. But the point is poor old, I want to talk about this. You think about this tonight. Jacob keeps telegraphing this situation that exists in his mind, right? Is there any doubt who Jacob's favorite wife is? Does he leave any doubt?
Doesn't it say, though, that he himself went before them all?
Oh, yeah, he was going to do that.
Okay.
He was going to be
So
the
at least
right guy.
least he was.
But he clearly put Rachel and Joseph in the safest possible position at the very back. You know. Anyway, interesting thing to note. Then he goes back, and then across the river, in verse 22 through the end of chapter 32 is when he has this wrestling match with this man, right? It's interesting because at first it's a man, and then it's a messenger from God, and then finally Jacob ends up and he names the place. What's he name it? Do you remember? Peniel? No, it's Peniel. This is Peniel. He says, because I have met God face to face and lived to tell about it. Right? And then God gave him a new name. And what was the new name? Israel, right? And what does Israel mean?
Struggles with God is one
He who
interpretation.
struggles with God, right? And so I often thought about that. That's, Israel's the name that we all think about, right? There's two words that pop up most in our language if you look back through your whole life concerning this. And those two words are Jew and Israel, right? They're in the popular culture. They're everywhere, right? Now, Jew comes specifically from Judah, and Israel is the name that right here God gives to Jacob. So I just think that's kind of interesting. And you remember when God gives somebody a new name, it's because this is a critical point in their life, and things are changing from this point forward. So, but do you think the name Israel is apropos for Jacob?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah?
I was just going to say Esau has a name change too, or is it just that they they call him also the Edomites?
Yeah. It doesn't say that he had a name change, but it does say that he ends up being known by two different names.
Right.
One of them is Esau, which means what? Hairy, or fully formed. And the other one is Edom, which means dirt. It's reddish dirt is what it really is. Red dirt. Anyway, so it's the next day. This is in chapter 33. All that to say, here we are in chapter 33. And we can start with this. I'm going to read chapter 33 if that's okay, and then we're going to take it apart because there's all kinds you talk about unsaid stuff. Lots of unsaid stuff here. So starting in Genesis 33, verse 1, Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men. And so he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants. He put the maidservants and their children in front, and Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. And then he himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And then Esau looked up and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these with you?" he asked. And Jacob answered, "They are the children that God has graciously given your servant." Then the maidservants and their children approached and bowed down. Next, Leah and her children came and bowed down. And last of all, Joseph and Rachel, and they bowed down. Esau asked, "What do you mean by all these droves that I met?" "To find favor in your eyes, my lord," he said. But Esau said, "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." "No, please," said Jacob. "If I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God now that you have received me favorably. Please accept the present that was brought to you. For God has been gracious to me, and I have all that I need." And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted it. And then Esau said, "Let's be on our way. I'll accompany you." But Jacob said to him, "My Lord knows that the children are tender and that I must care for the ewes and the cows that are nursing their young. If they are driven hard just one day, all the animals will die. So let my Lord go on ahead of his servant while I move along slowly at the pace of the droves before me and at the children until I come to my Lord in Seir." Esau said, "Then let me leave some men here with you." "Oh, but why do that?" Jacob asked. "Just let me find favor in the eyes of my Lord." So that day, Esau started on his way back to Seir. Jacob, however, went to Succoth, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place is called Succoth. And after Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. And there he set up an altar and called it El Elohe Israel, which is God, the God of Israel. Nice chapter. Let's see, I want to geography first here for just a second. So he's coming down this way. Now, here's Peniel here, and here's Sukkoth. I'm not sure I agree with that, but then anyway, the Jabbok River is not real shown here, but the Jabbok River is a little river that flows.
Your laser went out.
No, it's not. It works fine to me. I can see it. Okay. It goes right through here. And, you talk about a river. It's not much of a river. You can't see it. Okay, well, just trust me. Here. Anyway.
Now, there you go.
Oh, I think the battery might be weak. No, yeah, it does. It starts off a big red dot and gets small. Anyway, the Jabbok River flows into the Jordan River. And that's the river he crossed. That's where he met Esau. Now, Esau lives down here in Seir, in Edom. Seir is otherwise Petra. So if you ever go to Petra, we've been to Petra. Petra is where Seir is. And it's southeast of Israel. And so Esau comes up this way, comes roaring up here with his 400 men and meets his brother right in here. All right? Now then, after this exchange, where Jacob deftly, you guys want to change that battery? They should be in a box in that thing, second shelf down. Anyway, Jacob kind of talks the conversation around and basically says, no, you don't want to go with me. I'm going to go too slow, and I sure don't need any of your 400 men here. And so they separate. After this day, they separate. So their reunion didn't last a long time. It didn't spend like a week there messing around, right? And so Esau basically turns around and goes on down. Now, from the conversation, it looks like he expected Jacob to follow him. But it says, and it uses the word but in the translation, but Jacob goes over here. So rather than go south, Jacob went west. He crossed the Jordan River and went the other way. So I think it's really interesting that while the conversation would imply that Jacob was going to follow and go down and meet his brother, his long lost but now very happily satisfied brother in Edom, but Jacob doesn't do that at all. Jacob, he doesn't go the opposite direction, because as John pointed out, the opposite direction is back toward Laban. He doesn't want to do that. So he's kind of like, well, I can't go north and I can't go south. I guess I'll go west. Yeah. They take the little bitty dudes. I'll figure that out. Thank you. That's very nice of you. Got to have my laser work. So are there any questions about the geography there? Yeah.
Not about the geography, but
what's so hard
I
on
think
that?
Esau was a little diabolical, where he knew what the deal was with Jacob when they were younger. And imagine after the years, Esau was mellowing out. And so he brought the 400 men with him in a way to intimidate Jacob.
I think that's fair. That's a fair
okay,
conclusion.
Then, not expecting the outcome of this, Jacob was shaken to his knees, that 400 men and with that. But there was a real sweetness about Esau, how he forgave Jacob for all this thing. I think when he saw him, and it's like Joseph's brothers back when Joseph.
I think that's certainly a conclusion that you can draw. I think others have drawn a different conclusion, but there's not enough text to make what you say not true. So it's okay. There's a lot of people that view this as kind of hidden acrimony. There's a bunch of tension between Esau and Jacob, but it doesn't necessarily come through. So your reading is okay. Yeah, Paul?
Quick question, and I don't know the answer, but you can see the distance between them. How would Esau know that Jacob is on his way and go, how many miles is that, to meet him?
It's less than 100. It's probably 60 miles.
Okay.
But I tell you, the other thing that I thought about that too, the area out here is really unusual. First of all, this area down here is pretty much below sea level. And this area up here is on a nice high plain. And you can see things a long ways. And so now he sent his men down, Jacob sent his men down to tell his brother that he was coming. And his men came back and said, well, he's going to come greet you, and he's bringing his 400 men. But if Jacob were up on a plateau, he could see the 400 men because they'd be kicking up all kinds of dust and stuff. So I think he could probably see them coming.
Do you get the idea maybe Jacob didn't fully trust Esau?
I get that idea, yeah.
Oh. Well, you know, Yahweh did tell him to go back to the land.
Yes,
So-
that's a good point. God told him, God specifically did not say, go back with your brother Esau and visit him in Seir and make up. Didn't say anything like that. He said, go back to Bethel. Bethel's over here, right? So Jacob was doing what God told him to do. Yeah,
So in verse 4,
okay. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept.
no,
Okay?
32? Are we on 32 or
No,
30?
33.
Oh,
Well, what's in 32 that you liked?
sorry. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom, and he commanded them, saying, Thus say ye, spoke unto my lord Esau thy servant. Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now.
Yep.
I say, okay, so what? Sojourned is the Hebrew word garti. It's spelled Gimel Resh Tav Yod.
Okay.
If you add all those numbers up, guess what you get?
666.
613.
Oh. I'm sorry, darn.
Oh, you were close.
Yeah.
So what does 613 remind you of?
That's the number of, theoretically, it's the number of commands in the Torah.
Right. Now, the actual number is more than that.
Well,
And
I've
it's
never really
interest-
counted them.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. First of all, different rabbis have different lists. The one
Yeah.
that's sort of the standard one is the Rambam, Maimonides.
Uh-huh.
He's the one that's everybody kind of adopted, I guess. And Nehemiah, according to Nehemiah Gordon, this is where they get. Here's what it says in quotes. I lived. This is their interpretation of the gematria because of
Okay.
the. I have lived with the wicked Laban, but I kept the 613 commandments, and I did not learn from his evil deeds.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I guess
Well, I mean, that's kind of looking for stuff, but that's all right.
Right.
Yeah.
I reading it back, I thought there was more of a swipe at Esau, because when he was with Esau, he definitely didn't follow the commandments.
That's true.
I would say, in no way.
Yeah.
And so maybe, living here, he sort of had to deal with the reality as far as what he should be doing.
Okay. I can kind of see what you're saying.
So
I thought you were going to talk about the word sojourn, which means,
Well, sojourn is, I'm looking at, they're looking at it at the gematria level.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a different level of,
but I was just thinking that sojourn means to stay a while. It doesn't mean relocate.
right. And
So-
it has that word ger or garti in there. It's, close to that word. So,
Yeah. Okay.
anyway.
Rest with Laban. That's okay. All right. I beg your pardon?
I said it's also the number of seeds in a pomegranate.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Anyway, what we were going to, what I was trying to figure out what I was going to talk about there. Oh, I think when he comes roaring up with his 400 men, he might have been kind of, envisioning a battle, envisioning, when do I have this out? And you kind of imagine what he saw. He saw a bunch of women and kids and goats and sheep and stuff. He didn't see people ready to do battle with him. I mean, in some sense, it was probably a little bit of a letdown for Esau when he saw this.
This is assuming, of course, that that's what his intent was to go after Esau.
Well, but
Jacob.
the key there is these 400 men.
But what are they doing? How do we know? Does he need 400 men to go take out Jacob? I find that unreasonable.
Well, I do too. But I
So,
guess my point is if it weren't for the 400 men, we wouldn't have any potential conflict at all.
I know, but that's all in his head.
I agree.
That's in Jacob's head.
It's the 400 men that scared
So
him.
we're speculating what his intent was.
Yes, we are.
He could have been going to kick somebody's rear end that's not following in line because he's doing what he's supposed to be doing.
Sure.
We don't know.
Nope. And I think that's intentional.
And if you read this document, there's no evidence that says, well, that is his intent.
No.
To promote. Quite the contrary. He's offering all this stuff, and he says, I don't need this.
Yeah.
know,
And although
he offers to have
says,
the
he
men-
says, I don't want this. You keep your stuff.
Right. He had to
But
force it on him.
Jacob says, no, you take it. So he says, well, okay. I mean,
There's
that's kind of the way I look at that.
There's another thing, too, where he says he kisses him.
Mm-hmm.
In the Torah, there's 6 or 7 dots above that Hebrew letter. And again, the rabbis say he really meant to bite him in the neck. That's really what he meant.
Yeah. That's what I was getting at about this particular passage has all kinds of interpretations, none of which are terribly easy to support.
Right.
But all of which could be true. Any of which could
Right.
be true.
Okay, I got 3 hands over here.
That's good.
Okay, so it's my first time here, so
That's fine.
I don't know how you guys do things. but-
Everything's great.
yeah. I'm just kind of seeing this. So in verse 20, I have the New Living Translation, but
Okay.
it says El Elohe Israel. So he says, and there he built an altar and named it El Elohe Israel. And then at the bottom, it says El Elohe Israel means God, the God of Israel. So, in the past, Jacob has been kind of struggling with that, his identity and, telling God, are you going to be with me, et cetera. So I love how he's finally identifying with who he is, He's saying, God is my God. God is the God of me. God is the God of Israel.
Yep.
And I think that's really special because God wants us all to identify with him.
Yeah.
And it's not until we go through trials and tribulations, and Jacob went through a lot since we know everything he's gone through up to this point.
Yep.
So that just shows, that God's going to see you through to the end. So
I think that's a very
beautiful.
good point. I think it's also shows about how Jacob's life, he trusted God. He reminded him just 24 hours before, I'm scared to death here. I think I'm getting ready to meet my end at my brother's hand, but you said you'd protect me. And so a lot of what he said there was, you did what you said. So yeah, there's a big feeling of gratitude there. I agree with you.
I want to go back to these 400 men that Esau had.
Okay.
Esau ran to meet him, embrace him, but Jacob said, "Hey, you guys, stay behind me. Let me go ahead. Let me be the front man, or the point man, and you stay back there," because Jacob was not. He was untrusting what Esau was going to do, so he thought maybe that Esau would come after all the kids and the wives and so on and so forth. And it's interesting to know when he saw Jacob, Jacob did not run to him, but Esau ran to him and embraced him and fell on his feet or on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. It was like maybe that Esau had sympathy towards Jacob for whatever was going on, because at this point, Jacob was limping.
That's a
You know,
good
from
point.
the
Yep.
from the
He was
wrestling.
limping.
And so
Yep.
I think that God softened Esau's heart towards Jacob,
Yep.
and
That's a perfectly good rendition. I think it could be true. I can imagine that Esau was taking that whole trip up there, just kind of licking his chomps, waiting to get at him and, get his vengeance. And he sees Jacob. And he hasn't seen him for 20 years. He probably looked a little bit old, like you say, and he's limping. And he sees all these kids and wives and, these things laying around. And he thinks, man, how in the world, what kind of guy would I be if I wiped all these people out, And it really is kind of good to see the old dude. Maybe that is what happened. That's kind of what you're describing. Yeah?
A couple of things, but one is what she said about this being my God, because at the beginning of his journey, he was not quite sure about
Yep.
it. And he says, I'll let you be my God if you do this and so.
Yeah, he was kind of, he wasn't really making a bargain, but he was saying, I'll know you're my God
when you do
when you
this.
do, yeah, uh-huh.
The other thing I was thinking is that when David was running around away from Saul, didn't he travel with several hundred men just roaming the hills? This could have been the possibility with Esau, that he was just out with his men
Sure.
going around.
Sure. It
And
could have been.
especially when he said, I don't need these things. I'm not going home. What am I going to do out here
Yeah.
when we're running around with all this
Yep.
junk?
Yeah, well, there's something to be said for that, because Esau was a rich man. And I'm sure that whenever he decided to go somewhere, he went with an entourage. But I think the number 400, it certainly impressed Jacob in a negative way. And 400 men's a lot. So I don't know. But no, you could be right. It's like, let's go for a little afternoon drive. Come on, you 30. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. I think the most interesting thing in the story, all of those things like we've talked about could be true. To me, the most interesting thing in the story is that finally, fairly quickly, Esau says, well, it's been nice seeing you. See you later, and heads back south. I mean, I'm sure that they, on the way up to meet Jacob, that wasn't the picture they had in their mind of when they'd be going back or how they'd be going back. That's just my opinion. And then the assumption that Jacob was going to follow them and the fact that he went off in a different direction, that to me, those are the real interesting things in the story. But that's just me. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking since he said, we'll go with you, he wasn't planning on a quick thing. He figured that
No, he was going to
Jacob-
stay. Yeah.
Jacob was going to be going along and they'd be riding together.
Yeah.
And even so, he may have imagined that this would, be one of those things that over the next week or 2 weeks we'll get a chance to talk.
Yeah.
But Jacob still being a little bit apprehensive about
cautious.
this kind of thing. Yeah. Just say, well, you guys go ahead and we'll catch up with you or we'll meet you there.
Yeah, I can say it's very interesting to me that God put this story in here in such a way that you can read it and you're not quite sure how to analyze it. At least I don't think you are.
I don't think Jacob had any intentions of going with him.
No, I don't either.
There was, he tried to curry favor with his brother, and he already knew where he was going. So was there a little bit of prevarication there?
Well, yep.
In terms of
Good old deceiver.
Jacob,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
deceiver?
Yeah. Because no record that he said, well, I'll be along to visit you later, but God has told me to go over to Bethel here first. He didn't say that.
No.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So, anyway, we'll move on because it gets a little more interesting. It says in verse 16, so that day Esau started on his way back to Seir. Jacob, however, went to Succoth, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place is called Succoth. After Jacob came from Padan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, plot of ground where he pitched his tent, and there he set up an altar and called it El Elohe Israel. Now, Shechem is right here. Shechem is in the valley between two hills. Does anybody know the name of those two hills that are on both sides of Shechem? Yep. Go ahead, say it out loud here.
Ebal and Gerizim.
Ebal and Gerizim. Those are hills, those are mountains that we're going to learn about in, I guess it's Deuteronomy. Anyway, but Shechem is down in the middle, in the valley between them, and they're there today. Mount Ebal, obviously the mountains are still there. Mount Ebal has been the home of this is in what's known as the occupied West Bank. Before 1967, this was occupied by Jordanians. But in the 1967 war, the Israelis pushed the Jordanians out, but they've always kept that border thinking that, well, that's just occupied land because it really belongs to Jordan. Israel doesn't see it that way. And of course, there's many Israelis that feel like it's our land, and so they've planted little communities around there. What do they call them? Settlements, I think is the term that the Israelis use for them. And there's one on top of Mount Ebal. I think it's Ebal. Maybe it's Gerizim. It's one of the two. They planted a vineyard up there, and that's been up there for, well, I've been there 20 years ago, and it's still there now, and they made a vineyard out of it, and they produce wine up there. Some of you guys have been up there. It's nice. It's cool. The Israeli government has tried to get rid of them several times, but they're still there. The other side of Mount Gerizim, I think Mount Gerizim is where the vineyard is, and Mount Ebal is where there's nothing. It's just bare. And all of this is in what's in part of Israel that's controlled by the Palestinian Authority. And so Shechem's still there. It's called Nablus. And Nablus is a Palestinian city. And it's entirely different than the cities you see in Israel. The cities you see in Israel, for the most part, are neat and tidy and prosperous. And Shechem is kind of a not neat, not tidy, not prosperous looking community. Let me put it that way. So I just think it's interesting that it's still there. This, again, I always like to tell people this is not like Narnia or something. You can go see these places. Yeah.
So I wasn't paying attention when you were using the map. Is Shechem short of Bethel before he gets to
Yes,
Bethel right
Shechem
below it?
is a little bit north of Bethel.
Okay. So his instruction was to go to Bethel, and he stops.
Yes, but he's not quite there. Yeah, he stops at Shechem first.
But he stops and he buys a piece of property. So that's like
Yeah. That's
he's
interesting.
planning on being there a while, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, as a matter of, well, we'll talk about that. First of all, I'm glad you brought that up. If you drew a line between Shechem and Bethlehem, about 2/3 up that line is Bethel. And then if you drew a line from Jericho over to the Mediterranean, Bethel sits on the place where those two lines cross. And the reason I say all that is because though that place is probably one of the most well-documented locations in the Torah. You know, it's still there. You can find it. It's all Bethel is in the middle of a community now. It's called Bethine, and it's a bunch of condominiums, and it's kind of like a suburb of Jerusalem. But Shechem is still very much a separate place. Anyway, so yeah, Jacob goes there. Shechem, you know, there's a stream that runs through there, and it's not a bad-looking place. And I could see that if you were living back in those times and you had a bunch of sheep and cattle and stuff you needed to take care of, and you could buy some land, that'd be a good place to settle down. I don't think he never intended to say, this is my home forever. It was just, I get the impression this is where they were going to spend the winter. I mean, I don't have any foundation for that. That's just my thought. Any other thoughts about that? So they're camped out. I'll just say it this way. They're camped out for the winter in the valley there near Shechem. And Shechem is confusing because the name of the town is Shechem. The name of the king of the town, the mayor or whatever you want to call it, the guy that runs the town, is Hamor. And Hamor has a son whose name is Shechem. So you use the word Shechem, you have to make sure you're talking about the son or the city, whichever one. And you can imagine that back in these times, it's probably a big walled city. Not big, but, you know, decent sized. And they've got their own gods. They're Canaanites, so they're not, You know, they see these wandering nomads come filtering down with all these sheep and stuff, and they find a place out there outside the city by the stream, and Jacob goes in and negotiates and says, I'd like to buy some land out here so I can pitch my tents and feed my animals. That's where we're at. Any thoughts? Okay, we'll move to chapter 34. This gets very interesting. Let's see. We'll let you guys read from. Someone would like to read from verse 1 in chapter 34 through verse 17. Go for it.
And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And Shechem, son of Hamor, the Hivite, is he Hivite or Hittite? Is he
Hivite.
Hivite?
It's a little different than the Hittites.
Hivite, prince of the land, saw her and took her and lay with her and humbled her. And his being clung to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke kindly to the girl. And Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, Take this girl from me for a wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with the livestock in the field, so Jacob kept silent until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to meet Jacob to speak with him. And the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it. And the men were grieved and very wroth, because he had done a senseless deed in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, which should not be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, My son Shechem's being longs for your daughter. Please give her to him for a wife, and intermarry with us. Give us your daughters, and take our daughters for yourselves. And dwell with us, and let the land be before you. Dwell and move about in it, and have possession in it. And Shechem said to her father and her brothers, Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I give. Ask of me a bride price and gift ever so high, and I give according to what you say to me. But give me the girl for a wife. But the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father, and spoke with deceit, because he had defiled Dinah, their sister. And they said to him, We are not able to do this matter, to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a reproach to us. Only on this condition would we agree to you, if you become as we are, to have every male of you circumcised. Then we shall give our daughters to you, and take your daughters to us, and we shall dwell with you, and shall become one people. But if you do not listen to us and be circumcised, we shall take our daughter and go.
Okay, so would someone like to summarize what's gone on here, the action, so you can see whether or not we've got a sense for what happened? Okay, Joe. Wait, we want everybody to hear.
I was just thinking in the New Testament, it speaks about circumcision, where I think as Paul was addressing the people, or somewhere in the New Testament, unless you're circumcised, you know, that was a sign of being with Yeshua, the circumcision.
Well, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And it was also a custom, because
Yeah.
it was almost an identification
Well, it
badge.
was a sign of the covenant that God made with Abraham, but that you didn't answer the question. What I asked you to tell me was, can you describe the situation that we just read? Does anybody want to just kind of say what happened? Go for it.
This situation is flies in the face to Middle East customs, cultural. This is a no-no, an absolute no, even today. Having lived in the Middle East for quite a while, I understand the culture hasn't changed. And this guy took this girl, and the situation now is they're trying to dig themselves out of this issue. But there's also also something else here, too. They've watched Jacob come in with all of his herds and with all of his wealth, and they're looking at this as an opportunity as well. So there's several motives here. And the brothers get involved now, and they're looking for a way to exact some
Revenge.
retribution
Yep.
for what they did to their sister.
Yep. Yep. That's all true. That's very good. The word my Bible uses, which yours did not, is rape. Rape. This Hamor raped Dinah and loved her. It also says he loved her and wanted her to be his wife. So yeah, it would have been, it's obviously a serious sin in any culture. And you're right, they're trying to make their way out of it. And what Hamor has done is Shechem has gone to his dad and says, well, I kind of screwed up here. I raped this girl, but that's beside the point. I really want to marry her. I want her to be mine. I really love her. And I want you to go out and talk to her father and arrange so that I can have her for my wife. Now, why would he do that to his dad? Why would Shechem go to his dad and say, I want you to go do this? Margaret, were you going to say something?
Well, to answer your question, he knew he messed up.
Yeah, he knew he messed up.
He knew he totally messed up. But what I wanted to say was at the beginning here, or right before the beginning of 34, when the plot of land was bought for 100 pieces of shekel, it seemed like they were moving into the area already. So
Yeah.
I think I remember and I'll refer to the book of Jasher because it kind of comes back to me that they had some kind of a festival, a local festival and Dinah and some of the other girls went to the festival, and this is what this guy Hamor took an opportunity to, go with.
You probably
Dinah.
had too much to drink.
Yeah, and
she
it was
did too.
it was
Yeah.
the local festival. So it seems like he's just trying to say, okay, you're already around us, become part of the community here.
Yeah. You make a couple of good points there. First of all, there's no indication that any of Jacob's family has ever been involved in any city of any size, right? So they're a bunch of local yokels, right? And this Shechem is probably a pretty exciting place. So, Dinah's a young girl, so, and I wouldn't doubt that there'd be some sort of a festival or something, and they probably said, can we go look around and see what's going on? Yeah, sure, just be careful. And she got in trouble. Probably nothing to do with her, but so that's true. What you say is true. As far as the land goes, the 100 pieces of silver, I was going to mention this. That land was used at a later time to bury Joseph's bones. And that land is still, you can still go see Joseph's tomb today, and it's in Shechem. So, but anyway, yes.
Well, in the very first sentence, it says that she went out to see the daughters of the land.
Uh-huh.
So she's out and about,
Yep.
like you say,
Yep.
maybe
She's
going
going
to the
sightseeing.
festival.
Let's go down to
But,
Manhattan and see what's going on in New York.
I've read this somewhere where Jacob is culpable because he was not protecting his daughter. He was just letting her. That's like, if you have teenage girls and you just let them,
Well,
go out and do whatever they want. kinda.
I don't know if I'd go clear to the word culpable.
Well,
but
it's just something I've
Jacob
read.
has never been, known for making great decisions, if you ask me.
Right.
So this is probably. I mean, I could see her up there kind of wheeling, It's a festival. I really want to go. Can I go? Can I go? Oh, okay, but just be careful. I'd have probably done the same thing.
Maybe she snuck out.
Could be she snuck out. Right.
Here's the thing that you asked the question about. Marriages were arranged
Yep.
between fathers.
Yep.
And so Shechem went to his father in order for him to go to Jacob
Yep.
to arrange this marriage.
Yep. That's exactly what I was looking for. That's why he went to his father. he says, I want you to go do the negotiating with her father so that I can have her for my wife. That's the way it's done. And then you notice the discussion came up where, Hamor, the father, is busy saying, well, my son is really in love with your daughter and he'd like to take her for his wife. We'll talk about the bride price. And Shechem sticks in his 2 cents worth. He says, I'll pay anything. Just do whatever. Make it as high as you want. I just want your daughter, right? He's smitten. And he just wants her for his wife. So, John.
Sort of in line with what Mike was saying, maybe it was delegated to Simeon and Levi to be guard over her, and that's why Simeon and Levi.
Well, it could be that, but I tell you one thing that struck me this time through is it's real clear that Dinah, Simeon, and Levi, and for that matter, Reuben and Judah, are all brothers and sisters from the same mother, right? They're not just part of the big family. They're all closer to each other than the others are.
Right.
So that's what's motivated a lot of this. And it goes back to good old Jacob and the way he differentiates between his family members.
Right. But, because we find out what they do later, Simeon and Levi.
Yeah, we're getting there. Yep.
And so are they doing that to kind of cover themselves for I'm really speculating here.
Yeah.
The other question is, where's Reuben? If Reuben is the oldest.
Yeah, well, we haven't figured out. Now, we'll talk about that too.
We don't really know. Did she cry out? It doesn't say that.
Nope, it does
not. So
not.
if she didn't, then she's sort of complicit in it.
Yeah, well, yeah. But the interesting stuff and the stuff that's really kind of the point of the story here comes next, right? Because they're busy talking about the bride price, and who is it that comes into the thing and says, verse 13 says, because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor, and they said to him, we can't do this, right? Why can't we do this? Remember, well, we can't do this because every male in our household is circumcised, and we cannot possibly have our sister marry some guy that's not circumcised. Right? Yeah.
And you still don't have the patriarch, Jacob, Israel, speaking up. The sons are kind of taking over the conversation. Dictating what's going to be done here.
The picture here, to my mind, is just really great. It's not that Jacob is clueless, because he's not, but he's got a lot on his mind, and he's older, and these guys are, 18, 20 years old, something like that, and they're eager to take up the gauntlet for their violated sister. We got to get revenge. This is horrible, what's happened to our sister. And Dad over there, all he loves is Rachel. He doesn't even care. It's kind of like what's going on in their minds, Yep.
Well, in them being deceitful to Hamor, they're also being deceitful to Jacob, or just showing disrespect.
Yep.
Which tells me, and we find out what happens to Reuben later, right?
Yep.
That these guys don't respect their father. He doesn't have a strong control over his family, and they just don't have a lot of respect for him.
I agree.
Which is kind of similar to deja vu all over again. What happened to Isaac, right? He didn't really, he showed very little respect for him by gaining the inheritance.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it.
Yeah.
It comes around.
Well, I tell you one thing, it certainly shows that the keynote of Jacob's life is deception. It's not only does he do a little, but he gets it paid back to him in spades.
So how old do you think Jacob is at this point?
How old do I think Jacob is? Oh boy, I don't know.
90s?
Is he 90? He's well past 60.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things I read here said it was 84 when he got married.
Okay.
So if he's in his 90s, gives 14 years with Laban.
Yeah.
So let's say he's approaching 100.
Yeah.
You've got all these sons.
Yeah.
And he's hearing Hamor negotiate.
Yeah.
He knows where his sons are.
Yeah.
And he's holding back because this is my personal opinion.
Yeah, that's fine.
He's holding back because he knows, I mean, a father knows his kids.
Yep.
He knows what his boys are going to do or what's going to be in their head. And he's probably thinking, I'm just going to wait till they get here and I'm going to let them do what I know they're going to want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's why he's holding back, because I'm going to let them the rage go on in them and do what they're going to do.
What?
He's not in the position in his own physical ability to do anything about it, but he knows his sons are.
Yeah, that's a good point. Although I don't think he had grasped the full magnitude of what his sons probably had contemplated. Yep.
Yeah, I think that was what you were going to say. I mean,
Yeah.
he ends up chastising them
Oh yeah.
tremendously.
Yeah. At the end, yeah.
In fact, when it comes to do the blessings, it's like, I got to skip the first three and go all the way down to Judah before I give him a
Because you guys have all disqualified
reasonable
yourselves.
blessing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering if they were setting them up, obviously they were, but in saying that, well, Shechem makes the mistake and says, I'll do anything.
Yeah.
So
What
they're
a-
like,
what a great
okay,
bargaining
okay.
position.
And but I wonder if it was a crime of opportunity or if they had in mind all along that they were, any way possible, they were going to seek revenge.
Well, that's a very good point. Now, it could be, I mean, where we are in the story so far is you could argue that this is the bride price. So they're negotiating bride price. Well, what's the bride price? Well, the bride price is all the males in your town have to be circumcised. Well, that's too high a bride price in my book, but whatever. What do you got, Mark?
So this is a little bit on the comical side of it. So the boys go and do what they do, and they come back. There's 3 mothers that are going to come before Jacob and say, how could you have let your sons go and do that? It wasn't one mom coming and telling him.
Yeah.
There's 3 moms coming and telling him, how could you have let my sons go and do that?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he heard it. Anyway, so we stopped at where we quit reading was where the sons say, not Jacob says, but the son says, we will give consent to you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves, and we'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and go. So it was not only that, not only was there not a lot of negotiation, but in my way of thinking, the bride price was abnormally high.
Well, the other thing, too, is, I mean, this circumcision isn't just something you're messing around with here. This is supposed to be a serious thing.
Yeah. They
And they're-
clearly didn't have a concept of what circumcision was about.
Right, and they're using it as a scheme to take advantage of people. That's got to not go well with
Yeah,
God.
I was going to say, God's not happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it kind of makes them Hebrews in form only.
I'm shocked at how many men were willing to do it for the king's son.
No kidding. Kind of tells you something about that society, doesn't it?
What I think is sad is that they weren't supposed to marry into the Canaanite women in the first place. and
Absolutely.
To have
Yeah,
taken
this-
that so lightly is
Yeah, not only
shocking.
is the idea that they could circumcise them and everything would be fine not a good idea, but God doesn't want this. God doesn't want them to intermarry with these people. Yeah.
Well, I believe they knew that, but it was a setup.
Well-
They weren't going to take a bride price. They wanted these men to be circumcised because that would give them an opportunity, kind of like what Michael was saying.
So you think this was all done with malice aforethought?
Well, they were angry. They were angry, so they were not going to let their daughter, their sister, marry.
Certainly, that could be true. It was just my thought that if they got the whole town men circumcised, that'd be pretty good revenge, if you ask me.
Well, part of it is we haven't read down there yet.
We'll get there in just a second.
Okay, so I
But
won't
go
go
ahead.
there.
So I didn't really think I think I had thought about it before, but now you reminded me. I just assumed this was their intent all along.
Maybe.
You're assuming that they would have said, well, no, we're not. This is crazy.
No, I'm not assuming anything.
No, I'm agreeing. It's a reasonable assumption
Yeah,
that
yeah.
they kind of expected that this ridiculous condition to meet, they would, are you crazy? We're not doing this.
Yeah.
And then they'd walk away and the problem would go away.
Yeah.
All of a sudden-
And even if they don't, they could just sit around and chuckle to these guys sitting around being in pain for a week because they circumcised the whole town.
No. Before they agreed to obviously they agreed to circumcise before they did the circumcision.
Well, clearly.
So
But what I'm thinking from the brothers' point of view, even if they had agreed to this, they could have just been happy with that. So I'm not entirely sure this let's go kill everybody at the end wasn't an afterthought.
I would say it was once they decided that they were going to be, that they did this, once they said, we will accept your offer.
Then they very quickly came to, okay, now I know what we'll do. Fine. It could
Yeah.
be. It could be.
But I think in their defense, they put this this offer with, they seemed ridiculous that no, these Gentiles aren't going to do this. Are you crazy? It's crazy that we do it, if you really ask me,
You can just imagine the conversation. Can you believe it? They said yes.
And then they did, oh my God, now what do we do?
Yeah. They agreed to it. I can't believe it.
Question. So do you think that the sons of Israel had a forethought of, let's just get past the part about whether they intended on killing them after circumcision or not, but do you think they had an intention on looting and taking everything they had? Because that is a big reward.
Yes.
Benefit for your own carnal, self-centered mind. If that's the case, it's an extreme turn of events because the sons of Shechem or Hamor, all of those people said, hey, let him marry us,
Yeah.
and all that's theirs will be ours.
Yeah. Yeah.
It got flipped the other way.
Yeah.
All that was theirs became theirs.
Yeah. Yep. Now, there's an awful lot at stake here, and I think old Jacob was kind of asleep at the switch, really.
The way this is written, really there was only two people in the beginning that agreed to the circumcision. They didn't speak for the whole town.
No.
Maybe he was a king
Yeah.
of that town or ruler of it, and he could talk them into it.
Uh-huh.
But I bet the rest of the men weren't real happy about this
Oh,
deal.
man, you can imagine. You can imagine. I mean, even no matter how many there was bound to be a few of them that said, no way, let me get this straight. I'm going to do what? Why am I doing this? That's why it makes a real important point here where the king says, just think, they'll intermarry with us and all that they have will eventually be ours.
So what is a marriage? It's a contract,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's a symbol of the sacred contract that we have with Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh.
Mm-hmm.
So here again, look how the contracts, when you're sloppy with your contracts,
Yep.
you get in real trouble. Every
Yep.
one of the patriarchs have gotten in trouble with a result of the contracts, I would say.
I agree. I agree with that. Let's finish this chapter, and then we'll see what goes on here. I'm sorry, you go ahead first.
I just suppose that it's possible that they didn't want their sister to marry this guy. So they put such a high expectation on him, assuming they wouldn't do it, and then they wouldn't have to. But since they did it, then they were obligated to have to.
Yeah, there could be something to that. There could be something
Now
to
we're
that.
obligated,
Yeah.
since they did what
But
we
they
said.
sure wanted some kind of revenge, though. Because, this ruined her life, for sure.
Hang on. Wait.
I think she agreed.
Well, you
myself.
think she probably wanted to marry him, is what you're saying. Yeah, that's probably true. Well, who would like to finish the chapter and read from 18 to the end of chapter 34?
18. And
Verse
their word
18. Okay, go ahead.
And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. And the young men deferred not to do the things because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the house of his father. 20. And Hamor and Shechem, his son, came up unto the gate of their city and communed with the men of the city, saying, These men are peaceable with us. Therefore, let them dwell in the land and trade therein for the land. Behold, it's large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us for wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only herein will the men consent unto us, for to dwell with us, to be our one people, if every male among us be circumcised, and as they are circumcised. Shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent unto them, and they will dwell with us. And unto Hamor and unto Shechem his son hearkened all that went out of the gate of his city, and every male was circumcised, all that went out of the gate of his city. 25. And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that 2 sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword, and came upon the city boldly, and slew all the males. And they slew Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house, and went out. The sons of Jacob came unto the slain, and spoiled the city, because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep and their oxen and their asses, and that which was in the city, and that which was in the field, and all their wealth, and all their ones, and all their little ones, and their wives took they captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, You have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and I being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. And they said, Should he deal with our sisters as with a harlot?
Okay, so this pretty much finishes up the story. And like I say, it's really amazing to me how the Torah just gives you just enough details so that you know what happened without there's not a lot of extra fluff in here. Yeah, John? Okay.
Well, John, he showed me an article that was about the biting on the neck.
Yeah.
So when I was reading it, there's a little story about Neville Chamberlain dealing with Hitler in 1938. And when I read this, where they say, these men are at peace with us. Now, I hate to compare the Israelites to Adolf Hitler, but in a sense, that's what happened. These men, peace in our generation.
Yeah.
They offer us peace and prosperity.
Yep.
And they go in and murder them all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of a shameless thing.
It was pretty vicious. There's no two ways about it. Yep.
So the Torah says, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
Mm-hmm.
Does a divorce equate genocide?
Well, not hardly.
Okay, I'm not a divorce. I mean a
Rape.
rape.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that.
That's what
effectively
happened here.
Yeah, no kidding.
Did they take the son? I'm just curious. Did they take the sons too? Were the sons with them? The little one, when the little ones that could have been.
No. The impression I get, and this could be wrong, but the impression I get is the slaying was primarily the brainchild and the activity of Simeon and Levi, but the rest of the boys got involved with the looting.
No. Right, but did they kill? Who did? Was
they
there
killed
any
Hamor and
seed?
Shechem.
Were there any seed of Shechem that survived?
Don't
That's
know.
my question.
Yeah, I doubt it. I doubt it, but I don't know. Yeah.
Circumcision was a fact of life with the Hebrew people.
Yep.
So Simeon and Levi knew what life was all about after circumcision took place. I believe that this was a calculated thing in order to, a setup, in order for them to take advantage. And like in so many situations like this have a tendency to snowball.
Yep.
They may have intended to take retribution, but I think that it quite possibly could have got out of hand.
Yep.
And then the brothers all jumped in, and it was a perfect opportunity to loot the city.
Yeah. Well, there is a thing, I've obviously never experienced it myself, but there's a thing in war where, if the battle gets heated and the adrenaline's pumping and you're slaying people, you just go crazy. and it's hard to stop. So you just keep going. It smacks of that kind of thing. And they had rage. Boy, they had rage built up. You know, they were really upset about what happened to Dinah. Yeah.
I think it kind of gives a clear distinction what honor might mean among different cultures. Because here this young man, Shechem, was the most honorable in this family.
Yeah.
So when Hamor and Shechem goes before the men in the gates, and then they give them their little speech as to why this would be a good way to increase our financial wealth and
Yeah.
their daughters and their sons, and they respected that.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much that Jacob's sons were very convincing.
Oh, no. Quite the contrary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this guy clearly
Well,
had.
I've often thought about that. You know, if you imagine that Hamor and Shechem are up there trying to sell this to all the men in the city gates there, a good number of them would see the wisdom in their comments. Well, yeah, these guys are doing great out there. You know, they're not bothering us, and they're really good at raising sheep and stuff. And why not? You know, and especially when he says, "Look, all they have will be ours." Not the other way around, right? All they have will be ours. So I could see the sales job kind of working, but I sure can't see a universal opinion of, "Aha, yeah, let's go." I know there had to be some that said, "Are you telling me you want me to do what now?"
Assuming they're sincere about protecting the honor of Dinah, I mean, let's say that it is.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Well, let's just assume it is. Give them the benefit of the doubt. They
Okay.
weren't just trying to cover themselves because a theory I had that they were not paying attention. But anyway, compare that to Lot and his daughters,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yep.
When the men were at the gate, he said, here, just
Take my daughters."
Take my daughters.
Yeah.
And these guys, what they do with him, and they wipe the whole city out.
Yeah.
It's just quite a contrast.
It is quite a contrast. Yep.
You think any of the guys snuck out and fled out the dung gate before it all went down?
Yeah, you bet. There's a bunch of citizens, male citizens of Shechem that decided to be out of town for a week. I'll bet you.
They were out tending to the herds.
Yeah. I got to go on a business trip. I'll be back. Maybe. Well, anyway, so what happens is pretty well described. All the males were killed, and then, like I say, it's pretty clear to me that the rest of the boys went in and helped themselves to the loot and got everything that was of any value. And then verse 39, then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." So again, it shows what Jacob's primary concern is. I mean, not that it's a bad concern, but he's basically saying, look, you guys, you've made us public enemy number one in the entire neighborhood here. And you can just see all the posters now. They're going to run around all these different cities, and they're going to all put together an army, and they're going to come just clean our clock. What were you thinking? And what was their response when Jacob says, "What were you thinking?" It says, "Well, were you just going to let him treat our sister like a prostitute?"
Yeah, okay. I'm wondering about the women and children that were left with no loot to live on and no husbands to provide. Did
Well,
they take the women?
I was going to say, typically what happens is those women would be assimilated into Jacob's
And yet they wouldn't let
family.
their sister marry into
Yeah.
them.
Oh, yeah. There's no way you can call this justice. Does it say that in 29? Then Jacob, okay. Yeah.
They're little ones, and they took the little ones and their wives.
Yep. They got all their wealth and all their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the houses.
So now they have sort of a mixed multitude
Yes,
with them,
they do.
if you will.
Yes, plus
How many of
there's
them
a
are
seed
resentful?
of I was going to say there's a seed of resentment in their camp now that's going to be pretty darn large. Yep. Yeah.
I find it curious that in most of this, they're still calling Israel Jacob as opposed to calling him Israel. He's still being called Jacob in these scriptures.
Now that's an interesting point. It occurs to me that throughout almost all of Genesis, he is very seldom called Israel. He's almost always called Jacob. And even when he's referred to later on, I mean, we refer to him God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Israel, while that's his new name, seems to be primarily used by the prophets. Don't know why, but something to think about. Yeah.
Just a quick thought. It's not Israel's trouble, it's Jacob's trouble. I think
Yes.
Jeremiah that says that.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, the way I've looked at it is Jacob is dealing with, when it's called Jacob, he's dealing with earthly stuff that he always seems to mess up somehow.
Yep.
And so his name Israel isn't called out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just when he's doing spiritual things, that's his name. That's his office, if you will.
Yeah. Don't know, but you're right. The rest of the scriptures use Jacob more often than they use Israel. When they use Israel, they tend to be talking about the nation, but not always.
I think this situation, what we're talking about now, goes all the way back when Jacob deceived Esau. And it's one screw up after another. I mean, it's all through his life. He, poor choices, poor directions, poor this, poor that. And being so naive, you would think through the years that he would have learned something, but he was very naive, and it cost him a lot for that naiveness.
Yeah, it did. That's why I said back, well, let's say we'll let Pat go first. Go ahead.
I think it's interesting that Shechem thought they were going to get all of the other people's possessions, and greed always ends up that way,
Yes.
where you lose it all when you're greedy.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, remember, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, whether it was Hamar or the men of the city or it was the sales pitch, I mean, Shechem was willing to give anything.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if his mind was focused on the wealth, but certainly his father.
Yes.
And when they got together to pitch this thing, they said, look.
That's how they sold it.
Yeah, that's how they sold the bill of goods. Yeah.
Although it's difficult to quite figure out why, it's pretty clear that Shechem really, really was in love with Dinah. And he really, I'm sure he felt bad about violating her, but he wanted to make it right, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Yeah.
Toss this out there as a curious question because I don't know the answer. I mean, to go out, whether it's to a festival or whatever, to hang out with the daughters of the city meant that you kind of had some type of relationship or interaction with them previously. Would this be a first time? It doesn't really say.
No.
But, and then the other thought was that Jacob's sons would have seen the deception. They were there when he left Laban. They were there when he told Esau, yeah, I'll come down and we'll go here. And so they seen this pattern of deception as part of their family. I mean, my dad's done this, so we can deceive too. I mean,
Well, that's a fair point. Now, one of the things I was going to say when we were talking about deception is, I remember when we were talking about when Jacob goes in and pretends to be Esau with Isaac, I said that dictated the whole rest of his life. That one act of deception put him on a path that had deception all over it. And he was on the receiving end of a lot of it. So he got paid back in spades for this. And here was a typical example. Something else I was going to say about that too, though. Oh, the other thing, again, that just dawned on me is, like you were saying about his sons growing up with the family life that they had, Jacob clearly made no effort to conceal the fact that Rachel was his wife. All these other women around having children by him were kind of, convenient and everything, but they were not the deal. It was Rachel that was the deal. And those boys knew that. And it was their sister that was violated. So they felt, in some sense, justified in kind of taking the reins and saying, we'll take care of this. Dad clearly doesn't care enough to do it. So all of this is because of the dysfunction in the family. And I often think about that, and it's really easy. I'm not raining on Jacob for that, because the boys were wrong. You know, it wasn't Jacob's fault that this stuff happened. It was the boys that did it. And the reason I come back to that all the time, the lesson I get out of, at least one lesson I get out of this is that, you know, God is pretty careful to tell you that, look, I'm going to treat all of you people differently. I treat each person in the way that he needs to be treated in order to develop into the kind of person that I want him to be and to live the life that I would like him to live. And if it looks like he's being favored and he's being given all kinds of stuff and you aren't, that's not your problem. Have you got enough to live on? Are you being dealt with okay? Do you have any complaints about me? Is your only complaint about me that I've treated this person over here differently? If that's all your complaint is, you don't have a complaint. And so I think that's at least one of the lessons we're supposed to learn from this. So while I would not have done the things that Jacob did in terms of favoritism, I don't think that it's fair to condemn him for that, because it was poor judgment. It wasn't sin. It just wasn't very smart. That's my opinion. Yeah.
So you talked about the consequences for the deception that Jacob did. It's carrying over into what is all mentioned to what his sons did. It carries even over into what happened with Jacob's favorite son, Joseph.
Oh, yeah.
The deception that the boys did to him. Now,
that was the most painful.
I want to point out a possible reason why Joseph is the target of this deception. I doubt Joseph is old enough to go over and do this stuff that happened over at Shechem.
Yep.
So all the other sons were involved, but Rachel's boy. And so all of this bad stuff that happened to them, Joseph, because Benjamin's not born yet, Joseph didn't become a part of it. So there might have been a little animosity with this Rachel's kid, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So that could have been part of this deception that ends up going towards Joseph.
Yep, I think you're definitely right about that. I mean, I'm sure that Joseph was too young to participate, but furthermore, he's already been identified and set up as the golden child, right? The jealousy that exists in these boys is just getting stoked all the time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Jacob, his character wasn't really 100%. And you would think that a father, after all he went through, wrestling with God and being crippled by God, that he would instill into his son, well, look what happened to your dad. I don't want this to happen to you. But there was no teaching of helping them become true
who
men.
he taught was Joseph. He taught Joseph.
Yeah, after so long a time, yeah.
But I mean, because
was-
Joseph got it.
Yeah, but the others didn't.
No, the others didn't.
I wonder if there's not a lot to do with the lack of forgiveness or confession. In my opinion, it didn't start with his deception with the clothing and that part. It started with the pottage bowl. When he sold him that, he had deceptive thoughts.
Deceptive sales practices.
So I'm thinking that because you never hear any part of it where he admitted he was wrong or confessed it as any sin in any way, shape, or form, that gave it liberty and life to continue on down the line. Because it seems like some of the things that David did were not right, but because he confessed his sin, that it wasn't as prevalent to
No, you make a good
follow.
point. You make a good point. This, I've often thought, David literally got away with murder, right? But he was very quick to confess. And although we don't have any record of Jacob confessing, he still never let go of God. You know what I mean? He didn't necessarily argue his case. He didn't say, but. It was basically, it was just hard. Jacob just chose a hard path. And it's certainly part of that. Yeah. Yep.
There are a couple of things there in terms of God having the knowledge of how this character, this personality would act in life, gives him a name that actually means deceiver.
Struggles with God.
And then the other part that I think goes home is that all of us here are imperfect. We make mistakes. We got character flaws. Whether they're written down for everyone else to see or not is different.
Thank goodness.
And yet we can see the mercy that was given, the grace and the favor that was given, somebody to be called out, selected as chosen,
Yep.
and we look at all these character flaws. I mean, I wouldn't want all my character flaws written in a book and my life dictated.
Me either.
You know?
Yeah, but that's what makes studying the Torah useful and fun. Yeah.
So I think it's Bill Cloud that he doesn't like the idea that it's called Jacob, or Jacob's name is translated as deceptive.
Yep.
That's actually what Esau calls him.
Yep.
One way, what he looks at it as hand on heel.
Yeah. That's, yeah. I've
Right?
often thought that we have made that mean deceptive.
Right. He certainly, I'm not saying he's not immune to that character,
Yeah.
but it's how you want to change the name you want to use. Another way, he was looking at it like, well, Esau was the firstborn, and Esau was trying to crush his head or something, so he's got his hand on the heel. That's a metaphor, but
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's just
Something to think about.
something to think about.
We have one more up here, and then we'll call it a night. You guys have been patient.
So ultimately, we're all human, because I heard somebody say, my brother talk about like his character flaws, being written out. But ultimately, we're all human, and we all have those same struggles. So, obviously, that's why the Word of God is such a good lesson for us, because we can read it and we can learn from it. That's it. And then there was something else about, because you guys were kind of going back with the porridge bowl or something. I think that's what you said. So there was kind of a lack of faith, like a trail, because it was his mother who,
Pushed him.
to do it, and that was her lack of faith, because she knew the promise.
Yeah.
The person who told her about the two, in her womb that were struggling. But how wonderful is our God that, he is merciful, like we've heard, and that he can redeem any situation. So praise God.
Yep. No, I often think that sometimes he sits up there and kind of chuckles to himself and says, you think you messed it up pretty bad. Watch this. And he takes the mess up and turns it around and does what he wants with it. So that's pretty cool. Let me pray, okay? Father God, thank you for the evening. Thank you for this discussion. Thank you so much for your Torah. Help us to go home and think about these things and just realize that they're here for a reason. They're here for instruction. And I'd ask that you just continue to instruct us. Help us to think about you often, to ask ourselves, what would you do in these different situations, and to just help us appreciate how much you truly love us. Keep us safe until we meet on Shabbat. In Yahushua's name, amen. Thank you very much. It's been fun. I knew we'd have a good time.